Imagine for a second that you are a military commander, right?
Yeah.
And you're tasked with defending a critical base. You're watching a radar screen and you see this incoming threat.
Right.
And it's a commercially available drone, like the kind someone might just buy online for maybe $2,000. But it's been strapped with an explosive payload.
Yeah, DIY weapon, basically.
Exactly. And to stop it, your current protocol dictates that you fire an interceptor missile. But that single defensive missile costs your government $2 million.
Which is just, I mean, the math on that is terrifying. Because you successfully destroy the target, right? You win the tactical battle, but you've just suffered a massive strategic defeat.
Because of the cost difference.
Exactly. If your adversary sends, say, 1,000 of those cheap drones, they barely dent their own budget. Meanwhile, you completely bankrupt your defensive stockpile. I mean, you lose the economic war right there.
Well, welcome to this deep dive. Our mission today is to explore the company that is actively basically flipping that exact math completely upside down.
Yeah, it's a total paradigm shift.
It really is. We are looking at this fundamental rewiring of global security. We're moving from this era of exquisite, multi-million-dollar singular weapons, right?
Yeah.
Into a reality defined by autonomous swarms, unblinking software, and defensive lasers that cost literally $10 a shot.
It sounds like sci-fi, but it's happening right now.
It does. And since we're breaking down corporate earnings calls for you retail investors out there, we are unpacking the Q4 and full fiscal year 2026 earnings conference call for AeroVironment. That's trading under the ticker AVAV.
And to truly grasp the stakes here, I mean, you have to realize that this transition is no longer just some theoretical white paper concept bouncing around the Pentagon.
Right, it's not a prototype.
No, the technology is active, it is deployed, and it is actively altering the balance of power on modern battlefields. By analyzing the financial and operational bedrock of a company at the absolute center of this shift, I mean, we get a completely unfiltered view of where the world is heading.
Okay, let's jump straight into the headline numbers. Because, like we always say, the financials are the ultimate truth teller here.
Absolutely. Show me the money.
Exactly. Because a defense contractor can have the most incredible, sci-fi prototype sitting in a lab. But until sovereign nations start writing checks with a whole lot of zeros, it is just a science experiment.
Yeah, it's just R&D.
Right. And AeroVironment's recent figures prove the experiment phase is officially over.
Yeah.
For their fourth quarter of fiscal 2026, they hit a record revenue of $642 million.
Wow.
Yeah. And that is a 31% organic growth rate year over year, which is just wild.
I mean, in the defense sector, that kind of growth is a massive anomaly.
Because it's usually so slow.
Exactly. Traditional defense primes like the massive legacy companies building aircraft carriers and fighter jets, they typically operate on very steady, very predictable single-digit growth curves.
Right, they're like utilities almost.
Yeah, exactly. So a 31% jump in a single quarter, that signals a shock to the entire system.
And it scales up for the entire year, too. Their full fiscal year 2026 revenue came in at nearly $2 billion. They maintained that 30% organic growth rate across the entire 12-month period.
That is just incredible consistency.
And it gets better for them.
Yeah.
Their funded backlog, which for anyone listening, that's the cash legally committed to them by governments for future deliveries, is sitting at a massive $1.2 billion.
That's legally committed cash.
Right. And their total bookings for the year were $2.7 billion.
And those booking numbers are the leading indicators we really need to pay attention to here.
Because it shows future demand.
Exactly. When a company has a book-to-bill ratio that high, it means they are taking in new orders at a significantly faster rate than their factories can actually fulfill them. I mean, the demand signal is just completely overwhelming their supply capability.
It's a good problem to have, but it's still a problem. I look at these margins and this trajectory, and it honestly looks a lot more like a Silicon Valley software company hitting hypergrowth and a company that bends metal for the military.
Yeah, it really does.
I mean, their adjusted EBITDA for the year was $286 million. And in Q4, they achieved their first positive free cash flow quarter, generating $73 million, which they hadn't done since the first quarter of fiscal 2025.
Right. They finally tipped into the black on cash flow.
But this company traditionally built highly specialized boutique hardware, small backpack-sized drones used by special operations. Achieving a $2 billion revenue run rate, I mean, that requires a completely different corporate DNA.
It requires a full transition from being like an artisan to being an industrial behemoth. And when you look closely at where this revenue is actually coming from, it paints a very clear picture of modern geopolitics.
Okay, break that down for me. Where is the money coming from?
Well, the overwhelming engine of this hypergrowth is their autonomous systems segment, which they call AXS.
Okay, and the AXS segment alone generated $492 million just in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, just in one quarter.
That single division accounted for 76% of their total company revenue. So it's basically the whole show at this point.
It is, and that data point validates a profound shift in military doctrine. I mean, global allies are no longer treating uncrewed autonomous systems as an experimental fringe category.
They're not just toys for special ops anymore.
Exactly. They are the core of defense procurement now. Based on the harsh lessons learned in recent global conflicts, militaries recognize that if they don't have a massive stockpile of autonomous systems, they are fundamentally unprepared for a modern engagement.
Which brings us to the actual hardware that's generating that $500 million a quarter. The absolute tip of the spear for AeroVironment right now is their lethal drone portfolio. And the scale up here is just staggering. We are talking about a category called loitering munitions.
Right, and a loitering munition fundamentally changes the geometry of a battlefield.
How so?
Well, historically, if infantry troops needed to strike a target over a hill or, say, hidden behind a building, they had to call in artillery or an airstrike.
Which takes a lot of time.
Right. It takes time, coordination, and it puts multi-million-dollar aircraft at risk. Or, alternatively, they could fire a direct line-of-sight missile, which means they literally have to physically see the target to hit it.
So what does a loitering munition do differently?
A loitering munition is a drone that launches, flies to a general area, and simply circles or loiters in the sky.
Just waiting.
Just waiting. It uses its cameras to hunt for a specific target profile. Once it finds it, it transitions into a kinetic weapon and strikes. It essentially becomes the missile.
And 4 or 5 years ago, this specific business line for AeroVironment was just a tiny niche. I mean, it was generating somewhere between $10 million and $30 million annually.
Barely a blip on the radar.
Exactly. Fast forward to this fiscal year, and that exact same category is generating roughly $500 million.
Going from a $30 million novelty to a $500 million operational necessity in half a decade is, I mean, it's incredible.
It's massive scale.
Yeah, it's a market that has aggressively found its product market fit, mostly due to the intense pressures of modern combat we're seeing right now.
And they're diversifying the payload and the launch mechanisms incredibly fast. The Switchblade series is their flagship, right?
Right, the Switchblade.
The Switchblade 300 is the compact version that a soldier can literally carry in a backpack. The Switchblade 600 is the heavier version designed to take out armored tanks. But now they have the Switchblade 400.
Yeah, the 400 is fascinating.
It essentially takes the armor-piercing capability of the larger 600 model and shrinks it down into a highly portable footprint. And it just won the U.S. Army's LASSO program.
Yeah, and LASSO stands for Low Altitude Stalking and Strike Ordnance.
Okay, so what does that actually mean for the soldiers on the ground?
The strategic goal of that program is to empower a small, dismounted squad of soldiers. Imagine you're pinned down by an enemy armored personnel carrier. Instead of waiting 30 minutes for air support, a single infantryman can pull a tube out of their pack, launch a Switchblade 400, pilot it over the tree line, and eliminate the heavy armor themselves.
Wow. So they don't need to call in the cavalry. They are the cavalry.
Exactly. It completely democratizes heavy firepower down to the individual soldier level.
But the platform that completely redefines the logistics of warfare, and this blew my mind reading the call transcript, is the Mayhem 10.
Oh, yeah. The Mayhem 10 is a game changer.
It's being built for the U.S. Army's Launched Effects program. It's fully autonomous. It carries a 10-pound payload that can be swapped out. So, it can carry an explosive warhead, or it can carry a reconnaissance camera, or even an electronic jamming module.
It's modular.
Exactly. But the real breakthrough is its launch capability. The Mayhem 10 is designed to be launched from multiple domains. You can fire it from a ground vehicle, a Navy ship, a manned helicopter, or even drop it from a larger drone.
And that multi-domain capability solves one of the military's most expensive, agonizing logistical nightmares.
Because normally they have to buy different things for different branches, right?
Exactly. Historically, a defense contractor builds a specific missile for an Apache helicopter, and a completely different missile for a Navy destroyer, and a third type of missile for a ground launcher.
That sounds like a nightmare to manage.
It is. It means the Pentagon has to manage 3 different supply chains, 3 different maintenance protocols, and 3 entirely different training manuals.
So the Mayhem 10 fixes that.
Yes. By utilizing a common launch tube architecture for the Mayhem 10, the military can just buy one single type of munition and distribute it across the entire fleet.
That is so efficient.
Right. If a destroyer runs out of ammo, they can literally take the crates meant for the infantry and load them right onto the ship. The logistical friction basically drops to 0.
That's wild. And they also have a new one-way attack drone called the Red Dragon, which is ramping up quickly under a new $17 million initial production contract from the Army.
Yeah, the portfolio just keeps expanding.
It does. And to support all of this, to physically build this massive arsenal, AeroVironment is constructing a brand new manufacturing facility in Salt Lake City.
This is where the business story gets crazy.
Seriously. When it opens in the spring of calendar year 2027, that single factory will have the capacity to produce $2 billion worth of Switchblades or similar products every single year.
Let that sink in. They are building a single factory that has the capacity to match their entire current corporate revenue.
And this is where the financial mechanics of defense contracting get incredibly interesting for investors. Because they are pouring massive amounts of concrete, they're buying industrial tooling to support a $2 billion output.
Yeah.
But they are doing this before all the final binding contracts for that exact volume are fully signed.
Right.
Which, it feels like a massive capital gamble. What if the government pulls the plug?
It looks like a gamble if you are only analyzing a static balance sheet. But management isn't just looking at the balance sheet. They are analyzing the macroeconomic reality of global military inventories.
Okay, unpack that for us.
The stockpiles of the United States and its European allies have been severely, dangerously depleted by the geopolitical events of the last 3 years.
Right, all the aid packages being sent overseas.
Exactly. Munitions are being expended in conflicts faster than the legacy industrial base can possibly replenish them.
So they're essentially doing the math on global insecurity.
Precisely. They have the underlying demand signals from the Pentagon. For example, the U.S. Army recently awarded AeroVironment a sole source IDIQ contract.
And IDIQ means indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity, right?
Yes, it's essentially a blank check up to a certain limit, and this one is specifically for the Switchblade 600. The total ceiling on that contract is $990 million.
Almost $1 billion.
Yeah.
Just sitting there.
Exactly. And additionally, they have another $874 million contract vehicle established for foreign military sales. That allows allied nations to purchase their drone systems directly.
So the government has essentially built the financial pipes.
Exactly. The pipes are there. If AeroVironment waits for the final purchase orders to clear all the bureaucracy before they start building the factory, they will be 2 years too late to meet the demand.
Because factories take time to build.
Right. They have to deploy the capital today to secure the manufacturing capacity for tomorrow. It's a build it and they will come strategy, but it's backed by near certain geopolitical demand.
That makes a lot of sense from an investment standpoint. But, pouring thousands of kinetic drones into the sky brings up a secondary massive technological hurdle.
What's that?
Well, a loitering munition is entirely useless if it doesn't know where to go. You cannot strike a target, you cannot see, and you cannot coordinate a swarm if they cannot communicate with each other.
Right. The software and sensing side.
Exactly. The lethal hardware is entirely dependent on the intelligence gathering and the software infrastructure, which takes us out of the explosive side of the business and into their uncrewed reconnaissance platforms and their software layer.
And reconnaissance is the absolute bedrock of any military action. You need an unblinking eye over the battlefield before you commit kinetic force.
I have to know what you're shooting at.
Right. And they are securing major wins in the non-lethal observation space to complement those strike capabilities.
Yeah, they recently won a $117 million contract with the U.S. Army for the long-range reconnaissance program. That's utilizing their P550 drone.
That's a huge win.
It is. And they secured a $15 million contract for the medium-range reconnaissance program with their Vapor 55 CLE platform. But honestly, the physical drones are almost secondary to what is happening inside the flight computers.
The brains of the operation.
Exactly. They have this proprietary software ecosystem called the AV Halo platform. And they recently rolled out 2 critical additions. First, Halo Instinct, which is a framework for deep autonomy. And second, Halo Detect, which allows the drone to autonomously identify and locate radio frequency signals in contested environments.
I'm so glad you brought that up because the term contested environment is arguably the most critical phrase to understand in modern warfare.
I see that term everywhere. Break that down for us. What does a contested environment physically look like to a piece of technology?
Okay, so think about a permissive environment, like flying a consumer drone in an empty park.
Right, perfect conditions.
Yeah. The radio link between your handheld controller and the drone is completely clear. You push the joystick left, the drone goes left. It streams high-definition video back to your screen perfectly.
Sounds nice.
It is. But a contested battlefield is the exact opposite of that. Adversaries use massive electronic warfare platforms to flood the airspace with radio frequency noise.
Just blasting the area with static.
Exactly. They blast the exact same frequencies your drone uses to communicate with GPS satellites and with the human pilot. The invisible spectrum literally becomes a solid wall of static.
So if you're flying a traditional drone and you fly into that wall of static, the connection is just severed.
Instantly. The screen goes black, the controls are dead, and the drone either falls out of the sky or it automatically initiates a return to home protocol, entirely abandoning the mission.
So the hardware basically becomes a very expensive paperweight.
Exactly. And this is exactly why autonomy is the deciding factor now. AV Halo allows the machine to detach from human dependency.
So how does Halo Detect work in that scenario?
With Halo Detect, if the drone flies into a jamming field, it doesn't just shut down. It uses its sensors to analyze the jamming signal itself.
Wait, it uses the static against them?
Yes. It pinpoints the physical location of the enemy radar or electronic warfare vehicle emitting that static, and it calculates a solution.
That is wild.
And then, with Halo instincts, the drone can make its own navigational decisions to complete the mission. It relies on visual navigation or internal inertial guidance, completely independent of GPS or a human pilot.
So it is entirely self-sufficient. It literally thinks for itself.
It has to, or it won't survive.
You know, I think there's a direct parallel here to the consumer tech world. And for retail investors listening, this is the thesis you need to understand.
Here.
We look at a company like Apple, right? And we marvel at the physical engineering of the iPhone, the titanium, the glass, whatever. But the hardware is just a vessel. The true value, the ecosystem lock-in, is iOS.
The software moat.
Exactly. AeroVironment is manufacturing the composite wings and the electric motors. But it feels like they're actually evolving into an artificial intelligence software company that simply uses drones as a delivery mechanism for their code.
That is the exact strategic pivot happening across all the premier defense contractors right now.
Because hardware is getting easier to build.
Exactly. The physical airframe is becoming commoditized. Anybody can build a carbon fiber tube with a propeller. The true differentiator, the moat that actually secures these billion-dollar contracts is the synchronized autonomy.
Meaning the drones talking to each other.
Right. It's the software that allows 50 drones to communicate, adapt to jamming, and execute a coordinated strike without any human intervention.
Which is an incredible engineering achievement. But it also introduces a terrifying scenario.
Always a catch.
Always. If AeroVironment is capable of manufacturing a $2 billion annual pipeline of cheap, autonomous, self-thinking strike drones, what happens when our geopolitical adversaries achieve the exact same manufacturing capability?
Right. They will reverse engineer or build their own.
Exactly. So how do you defend your own military installations against the very business model you are propagating?
And this is the great paradox of the current technological cycle. The offense has become so cheap and so decentralized that traditional defense is mathematically obsolete.
Which forces us to examine the defensive side of AeroVironment's portfolio. Because if you know the sky is going to be filled with autonomous threats, you have to build a shield.
You have no choice.
And they're building a highly complex, layered counter-UAS architecture. UAS standing for uncrewed aerial systems.
Right. And you cannot rely on a single defensive technology because drones operate across such a wide spectrum.
They come in all shapes and sizes.
Exactly. Some are controlled by RF signals, some navigate by GPS, and some, as we just discussed with AV Halo, are entirely autonomous and emit no signals at all. So a layered defense is mandatory.
Okay, let's look at those layers. The first layer of their defensive shield relies on the radio frequency spectrum. This is their Titan system.
The electronic warfare layer.
Right. It is essentially an advanced electronic warfare node. It passively scans the environment for the specific radio frequencies used by commercial and military drones. Once it detects a threat, It defeats it by jamming the signal.
It just cuts the cord.
Exactly. Severing the link between the enemy drone and its operator. And the market demand for this is skyrocketing. Sales of the Titan system more than doubled in the past fiscal year.
Jamming is the most cost-effective first line of defense. I mean, if you can blind the drone electronically, you never have to fire a physical weapon.
Which saves money.
Huge amounts of money. But as we established, adversaries are rapidly developing autonomous drones that don't rely on continuous RF links.
The ones that think for themselves.
Right. So when jamming fails, because there's no signal to jam, you need a kinetic layer. You need a physical way to destroy the drone.
Which brings us to layer 2. And honestly, this is where the technology jumps straight out of a science fiction novel. We're talking about directed energy.
Lasers.
Actual lasers. AeroVironment has developed a system called the Locust Laser Weapon System.
The Locust.
They recently deployed this high-energy laser on an active United States Navy aircraft carrier, the USS George H.W. Bush, to test its viability in a highly corrosive, dynamic maritime environment.
Because the ocean is brutal on electronics.
Exactly. And the results were flawless. A 100% success rate in acquiring, tracking, and destroying incoming drones with a concentrated beam of light.
That's incredible.
And remarkably, the FAA has actually cleared the Locust system to operate within domestic national airspace, meaning this laser can be deployed to protect critical infrastructure right here in the homeland.
To understand why the Locust system is the most revolutionary asset in their entire portfolio, we have to return to the concept of the asymmetric cost of defense.
The math problem we opened the show with.
Yeah.
The $2 million interceptor missile shooting down the $2,000 quadcopter.
Exactly. Every time a Navy destroyer fires a Standard Missile-2 to intercept a cheap Houthi drone in the Red Sea, the U.S. taxpayer is losing millions of dollars.
We're bleeding cash.
We are. And furthermore, a Navy ship has a finite number of vertical launch tubes.
Right. They can only hold so many missiles.
Yes. Once those missiles are depleted, the multi-billion-dollar warship is basically defenseless. It must retreat to a friendly port to reload.
It has to leave the fight.
Right. The Locust system fundamentally alters both the economics and the logistics of defense. It fires a precision laser beam that costs approximately $10 in electricity per shot.
$10.
Yeah.
You can barely buy a sandwich for $10.
I know. And because it draws its power directly from the ship's generators or its nuclear reactor, it possesses what the military calls an unlimited magazine.
As long as the engines are on, the gun is loaded.
Exactly. As long as the ship's engines are running, you never run out of ammunition.
$10 to instantly vaporize a threat out of the sky with zero logistical resupply required. That completely neutralizes the economic advantage of an enemy drone swarm.
It really flips the script.
But, a laser isn't perfect. It requires a line of sight, and it can be degraded by heavy fog, rain, or smoke. So you still need a physical kinetic interceptor for targets that get past the electronic jamming and the laser grid.
Yeah, weather is still a factor. This is layer 3, the kinetic interceptor. But it cannot be a multi-million-dollar legacy missile.
Exactly. Which is why AeroVironment is developing the Freedom Eagle 1, or FE1. It is a brand new, low-cost defensive missile purpose-built for the Army.
Okay, what's the price tag on that? They are targeting a price point of roughly $100,000 to $150,000 per unit.
Wow.
Yeah, that is a fraction of the cost of a traditional Patriot or Stinger missile. Management noted this specific gap in the military's arsenal represents a $1 billion market opportunity.
A huge addressable market.
Absolutely. And what stands out isn't just the price tag, it's the speed of development. They are planning to move the FE1 from the design phase into actual flight testing in roughly 12 months.
Okay, in the context of traditional defense procurement, a 12-month timeline from concept to flight test for a new kinetic missile is practically light speed.
Usually it takes, what, a decade?
Easily. Historically, that process takes 5 to 10 years of bureaucratic reviews, prototype iterations, and committee approvals.
So why are they moving so fast?
The fact that they are moving this fast indicates that the Department of Defense is just waiving the usual red tape. Because the strategic vulnerability is so acute right now, they need these yesterday.
Right. So we have covered how they are dominating the ground logistics with the backpack drones. We see them deploying lasers on the sea, and we know they are filling the airspace with loitering munitions.
They're everywhere.
But to truly control the future of global security, you have to dominate the ultimate high ground. We have to talk about orbit.
Space.
Yes, the natural progression for AeroVironment's infrastructure, and their next major pillar of hypergrowth is space, cyber, and advanced materials.
They refer to this as the SCDE segment, Space, Cyber, and Directed Energy.
Okay.
And it generated $150 million in revenue in the fourth quarter alone.
The scale of the contracts they were winning in the space domain is remarkable.
Yeah.
They recently secured a $240 million contract to develop and deliver long-haul laser communications terminals.
More lasers.
More lasers, but in space.
Yeah.
These are highly advanced optical systems that will be deployed on national security satellites in orbit. Separately, they secured another $240 million contract to research and develop next-generation ceramic materials.
Ceramics, like for heat shielding.
Exactly. Designed to enhance the physical endurance and survivability of spacecraft for the Air Force and the Space Force. They also have a $43 million contract to integrate their Panther phased array antenna technology onto Department of Defense Skyrange platforms, which are essentially high-altitude telemetry relay systems.
You know, you really have to step back and look at the sheer engineering breadth of this organization.
It's dizzying.
It really is. It is incredibly rare for a single corporate entity to possess the manufacturing agility to build 10-pound infantry drones out of carbon fiber, while simultaneously possessing the elite physics and engineering talent required to build long-haul space lasers that operate in the vacuum of orbit.
Right. It's totally different skill sets.
Exactly. It forces us to ask, what is the fundamental identity of this company?
Well, they're acting less like a traditional weapons manufacturer and more like the foundational infrastructure layer for the next century of warfare. The CEO explicitly used the term merchant supplier to describe their role in the broader space economy.
And that's key. The architecture of space is undergoing a massive transition right now.
How so?
Historically, satellites communicated with ground stations using broad radio frequency transmissions.
Like a giant radio tower in space.
Right. Those signals spread out over wide areas, meaning they can be intercepted, listened to, or jammed by adversaries.
Just like the contested environment on the ground.
Exactly. So the future of secure orbital communication relies on optical lasers. Satellites in low Earth orbit, medium Earth orbit, and geosynchronous orbit will pass massive amounts of encrypted data to each other using pinpoint laser beams.
Oh, wow. So they just shoot the data back and forth.
Yes. It is virtually impossible to intercept a laser beam moving between two satellites thousands of miles above the Earth, unless you physically place an object directly in the path of the beam.
Which is pretty hard to do in space. So they're essentially building the fiber optic cables of space, but without the physical cables.
That's a great way to look at it.
By securing a $250 million contract for these terminals, AeroVironment is positioning itself to be the primary provider of the essential plumbing. The secure data pipelines that every military and commercial space asset will rely on for the next 50 years.
It is a massive long-term strategic play. And it diversifies their revenue far beyond just selling explosive drones to the Army.
But, amidst all of this incredible technological momentum, the record revenues, the sci-fi lasers, the space infrastructure, there is a massive roadblock detailed in this earnings call.
It wasn't all sunshine.
No, it wasn't. The financial results weren't entirely flawless. The company had to take an $89 million impairment charge, and they experienced significant operational slowdowns in specific divisions.
Ah, yes, the friction of dealing with Washington.
Exactly. This brings us face to face with the harsh, often frustrating reality of having the United States government as your primary customer.
This is exactly where the bleeding-edge technology violently collides with the grinding, archaic gears of political bureaucracy.
Let's translate the financial reality here for the listeners. The company reported an $89 million incremental, non-cash goodwill impairment charge.
Okay, let's break that down into plain English.
In plain English, an impairment charge means a company has to admit on their balance sheet that an asset they own is suddenly worth less than they originally calculated.
They have to write down the value.
Right. In this case, the impairment was directly tied to a specific government project called the SCAR program, which was abruptly terminated for convenience by the government.
Just cancel out of nowhere.
Yep. Now, they still have $291 million of goodwill remaining tied to their broader space unit, so the division is still highly valuable, but it is a massive, sudden write-down.
That hurts the bottom line.
It does. And on top of that, their cyber emission solutions business experienced a noticeable slowdown. Why? Because of government shutdowns and funding delays that literally prevented AeroVironment engineers from deploying on-site with their government customers.
And that friction leads to the most sobering caveat in their entire future outlook. When management provided their revenue guidance for fiscal year 2027, They explicitly stated that their models are heavily baking in the assumption of a continuing resolution, or a CR, in the United States Congress.
And for anyone who doesn't track the agonizing minutia of congressional budgeting, a continuing resolution is a legislative stopgap.
Right, it's a Band-Aid.
When Congress fails to pass a comprehensive new budget before the start of the fiscal year, they simply pass a temporary measure that extends the previous year's exact funding levels. They just keep the lights on.
But there's a catch for defense contractors.
A huge catch. The critical problem is that under a continuing resolution, the military is legally prohibited from starting any new procurement programs, and they cannot increase the production volume of existing programs.
So growth is basically frozen.
Frozen. The CEO, point blank, told investors that they do not expect a fully authorized defense budget to be passed and signed until December, January, or potentially even March of 2027.
Which highlights one of the most dangerous paradoxes in the defense industrial base today. The military generals are sounding the alarm. Inventories of critical munitions are depleted.
The threat level is high.
Very high. The geopolitical threat environment in Eastern Europe and the Asia Pacific is rising aggressively. The technology, like the autonomous Switchblades and the Locust lasers, has been thoroughly tested and proven to work. The demand is ironclad.
So how can a legislative delay in Washington freeze a multi-billion-dollar technology pipeline when the national security demand is so urgent?
Because the Department of Defense is legally bound by the Constitution. They cannot spend a single dollar that has not been explicitly appropriated by Congress, regardless of how desperate the strategic reality is on the ground.
Their hands are tied.
Completely. The Pentagon knows they need 10,000 Mayhem drones tomorrow, but the actual release of the Capitol is held hostage by political gridlock and reconciliation battles in Washington.
Which completely dictates how AeroVironment has to structure their corporate operations for the coming year. Management is modeling a highly unusual 45-55 revenue split for 2027.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
They are projecting that only 45% of their total revenue will materialize in the first 6 months of the year, followed by a massive 55% flood of revenue in the back half.
Wow. They are heavily backloading the year.
They are literally organizing their supply chains and their hiring practices around the assumption that the federal government will be utterly dysfunctional for 6 months, and then the floodgates of capital will violently open once the budget is finally signed.
Operating a multi-billion-dollar manufacturing business under those conditions requires incredible capital resilience.
You need a strong balance sheet.
You do. You have to maintain your elite engineering workforce, you have to continue funding internal research and development, and you have to pour concrete for new factories, all while waiting for the political apparatus to catch up to the reality of the battlefield.
Which bridges us perfectly to management's master plan. Despite the impairment charges, despite the threat of continuing resolutions, AeroVironment is not playing defense.
No, they are going on the offensive.
They are making highly aggressive offensive financial moves for 2027. They are intentionally burning cash today to secure a monopoly tomorrow.
Let's look at the official guidance numbers for fiscal 2027, because they frame the strategy perfectly. They are projecting total revenue to land between $2.125 billion and $2.225 billion.
Which is still growth.
Right. That represents roughly a 10% growth rate at the midpoint. Now, that is a deceleration from the 30% they just achieved, but it accounts for those government delays.
The CR factored in.
Exactly. They are projecting an adjusted EBITDA between $305 million and $325 million. But the most revealing metric in the entire earnings call is how they're choosing to spend that cash.
The CapEx numbers.
Yes. They are allocating a staggering 12% to 14% of their total revenue directly into capital expenditures, or CapEx.
And for a company generating over $2 billion, dedicating 14% to CapEx is a massive physical investment.
It's huge.
CapEx is the money used to buy physical, tangible assets. It is the money used to buy land, build factories, and purchase robotic assembly lines.
They're building the future.
They are expanding their facilities in Huntsville, Alabama, specifically to manufacture the new FE-1 kinetic missile. They're expanding their footprint in Albuquerque, New Mexico to scale the production of the Locust laser systems. They're expanding operations in Dayton, Ohio. And as we detailed earlier, they are funding the massive new Switchblade factory in Salt Lake City.
It's an infrastructure boom.
On top of that, they are spending 7% to 9% of revenue on research and development to invent the next generation of autonomous tech. and they are spending 14% to 16% on SG&A, selling, general, and administrative expenses.
And that high SG&A spend is particularly notable because it signals their global ambition.
Yeah, they're not just selling to the U.S.
Right. The CEO recently conducted a major diplomatic and sales tour through the Asia-Pacific region. They are heavily investing in international sales teams to capture the foreign military sales market.
Everyone wants this tech.
Every allied nation on Earth is realizing they need this technology, and AeroVironment is building the corporate infrastructure to be the primary supplier for the entire democratic world.
But there is a harsh mathematical consequence to plowing all of your profits back into physical infrastructure and global sales teams. Sean Woodward, the new chief financial officer, issued a very clear, deliberate warning to investors on the call.
Oh, right. The free cash flow warning?
He said free cash flow will not be positive in fiscal year 2027.
Which Wall Street usually hates hearing. Let's define that real quick. Free cash flow is the cash left over after a company pays all its operating expenses and its capital expenditures. It is the money they could theoretically return to shareholders as dividends.
So by stating it will be negative, the CFO is explicitly telling Wall Street, look, the cash leaving the building to pour concrete and buy robotics will temporarily exceed the cash coming in from selling drones.
They are intentionally dipping into the red on cash flow.
Because they are choosing to prioritize maximum physical expansion over short-term profitability.
And this reveals the ultimate strategic vision of the management team. They are constructing an impenetrable supply chain moat.
What do you mean by moat in this context?
Well, right now, the defense sector is flooded with venture capital. There are dozens of scrappy, highly publicized drone startups trying to disrupt the legacy prime contractors.
We see them all the time.
Right. They have slick PowerPoint presentations and very impressive hand-built prototypes.
But a prototype is not a product.
Thank you. Exactly.
I mean, building one incredible drone in a lab in San Francisco is easy. Reliably manufacturing 10,000 identical lethal drones a month with perfectly sourced components under strict Department of Defense quality control standards that is brutally difficult.
It is. What separates AeroVironment from the startups is 2 decades of grueling experience in scaling military manufacturing. The CEO highlighted that their ability to rapidly and reliably produce tens of thousands of units a year is currently unmatched in the autonomous systems industry.
So the negative cash flow is actually a bullish signal for the long term.
It absolutely is. By intentionally taking their free cash flow negative today to build massive factories in Huntsville, Albuquerque, and Salt Lake City, they are permanently widening that moat. They are building the physical industrial capacity to completely dominate the next 3 decades of global allied defense.
They want to be the only game in town.
Exactly. They are ensuring that when the government finally resolves its budget gridlock and panics because they need 20,000 autonomous drones immediately, AeroVironment is literally the only company on Earth with the factory floor space to pick up the phone and execute the order.
It is a breathtakingly aggressive bet on the future of warfare. So let's take a step back and recap the sheer scope of the transformation we've just unpacked here.
It's been a lot.
It has. We started by looking at a company traditionally known for niche boutique hardware, suddenly crossing a massive $2 billion revenue threshold, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that autonomous technology has reached industrial scale.
It's mainstream now.
We examined the tip of the spear, the loitering munitions, the Switchblade 400, and the multi-domain Mayhem 10, and how they are reshaping battlefield logistics and generating $500 million in revenue.
And we explored the silent, invisible war of the contested environment. How the AV Halo software ecosystem is cutting the tether to human pilots, allowing these machines to detect jamming, make autonomous navigational decisions, and execute strikes entirely on their own.
Then we analyzed the layered defensive shield, exploring how the Titan RF system blinds incoming threats and how the sci-fi reality of the Locust laser system completely flips the economic script, protecting billion-dollar warships for roughly $10 a shot.
The math on that still blows my mind.
We looked out into the vacuum of orbit, seeing them secure $250 million contracts to build the encrypted optical laser plumbing for the future space economy. And finally, we confronted the frustrating realities of government gridlock and how management is aggressively burning cash to build an impenetrable manufacturing moat anyway.
You know, you now have a comprehensive understanding of the mechanics driving the modern defense industry. The next time you see a headline about a continuing resolution in Congress, or you read a news alert about a drone swarm deployment in a global conflict, you understand the underlying forces at play.
You see the matrix.
Yeah, exactly. You understand the manufacturing bottlenecks, the necessity of multi-domain logistics, and the critical importance of asymmetric defense economics.
We began this deep dive by talking about how the landscape of global security is shifting, moving away from multi-million-dollar interceptor missiles toward cheap, mass-produced autonomy. It's a profound technological achievement, but it leaves us standing on the threshold of a deeply unsettling question.
It does. We discussed how the Locust laser offers an unlimited magazine at $10 a shot. We discussed how the Mayhem 10 drone can fly autonomously, process its environment, and make tactical decisions without a human hand on the joystick.
The human is out of the loop.
Right. We are rapidly approaching a moment where private manufacturing capacity for endless autonomous warfare is scaling infinitely faster than international doctrine or human policy can keep up.
When the financial cost of waging a war drops from millions of dollars per strike down to $10 a shot, and the machines are increasingly making the tactical decisions independently, how does that change the fundamental calculus of conflict?
That's the billion-dollar question.
If warfare becomes cheap, automated, and economically sustainable, does it become inevitable? It is a brand new chessboard, and the pieces are beginning to move themselves. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the narrative, keep exploring the hidden mechanics of the world, and we will catch you on the next one.